Governor Ron DeSantis is here. Lots to talk to him about today. He was in New Hampshire and recently at the southern border, and that's where we'd like to start with the crisis there, which is really like nothing that we have ever seen in this country. In Texas, the governor said that as commander-in-chief, in certain instances, he would consider the use of deadly force when necessary. Watch this.
If somebody is breaking through the border wall, which they are doing in other parts, demonstrating hostile intent, or hostile action, you have to be able to meet that with the appropriate use of force. I don't see how you can just let them do that and carve through a wall on sovereign U.S. territory with a backpack full of drugs. And so of course you use deadly force.
2024 Republican presidential candidate, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis joins me now. Governor, great to have you with us today. Thank you for joining us on this story.
Sure.
So tell me a little bit about that. How do you determine hostile intent? What would be the U.S. force that would be used? Which branch of the military? And are you also talking about, if Mexico isn't carrying out its end of the bargain, potential operations that might happen on their side of the border, as we have done in the past with the DEA?
All options are on the table to defend the American people. People are dying by the tens of thousands because of the fentanyl that's trafficked in. And we talk a lot about the porous border, and it is very porous, and it's sad, and there's vast expanses where there's no wall, no barrier. We're going to obviously build the wall and do that. But what I've seen in my trips down there, and I've taken a number of them, the cartels will actually cut through the good part of the border wall. Like a blowtorch or a saw, they have backpacks on, they run in the drugs. So my view as commander-in-chief would be is we have to have appropriate rules of engagement to say if you're cutting through a border wall on sovereign U.S. territory and you're trying to poison Americans, you're going to end up stone cold dead. We are not going to put up with this. Right now, the drug cartels control our border. It's open season. Texas is doing a lot to stand up. We appreciate that. We've sent people from Florida. Joe Biden and the federal government are MIA. So that all changes on January 20th, 2025. When I become president, we're going to declare a national emergency on day one. We will mobilize all available assets. Okay. And Martha, it's not just at the border if the cartels are crossing. We're going to have maritime operations, because what you have is these precursor chemicals are being shipped in to Mexico. The cartels then take the chemicals, they create the fentanyl product, and then they move it into the United States, and it kills people in every community across this country. So we're going to do full spectrum to be able to finally put this issue to rest.
So you have also said that if the Mexican government, drags its feet, you reserve the right to operate across the border as well. So what would that look like? Are you talking about the kind of DEA operations that we saw back in the 80s?
I think what it will be are things that will send a clear message to the drug cartels. I think if you talk about interdicting them at the border with deadly force, that is going to make a big difference. They are not going to want to continue to do that. And we have a lot of assets at our disposal, and we'll keep them guessing as to what we will do. But I'm very confident that a determined executive can neutralize the cartels if you have the will to do it.
Well, that would be quite a shock to their business. No doubt that would really rock their world if you were able to do it successfully, because they've been getting away with quite a bit. Would you ramp up tariffs against Mexico to get Mexico's help involved here as well, Governor?
All those leverage points would absolutely be on the table. We have a lot of leverage over Mexico, and I think that it should be within the Mexican government's interest to cooperate with us. I do not think that they have given adequate cooperation under the current incumbent. By the time I'm president, there will likely be a new leader. We understand that. But just think of all the millions of people that show up at our southern border. A lot of those people are traversing from Central America, even South America, all the way through Mexico to get to our southern border. If the Mexican government was truly a good partner, you would not have that many millions of people showing up on our southern border. So they absolutely need to do more, and we need to be willing to use leverage to be able to do it. Incidentally, part of our plan is recognizing that we have people who are in the country illegally, who are working under the table. They send remittances back to Mexico. The Mexican government actually likes that money coming in because it's good for them. It's good for their country. We're going to tax those remittances. is, and we're going to use that money to finish the border wall construction.
I want a couple other subjects that I want to get with you, and then we're going to take a quick break. But this is with regard to Ukraine, Governor. If you were right now the commander-in-chief, how would you take advantage of the vulnerability that is surrounding Putin right now in terms of giving support to Ukraine? And do you believe that this is a moment of opportunity in that battle that should be aided by the U.S. government?
So I think we're at a point that Joe Biden's weakness has really created a lot of problems in the world. And I don't think we would be in this situation at all had he been leading with purpose and conviction from day one. I think a lot of our enemies have capitalized off that. So it brings us to this situation. I think it's a very uncertain situation. If you look at what's on the ground in Russia, none of these people are our friends. Some of the people that may be trying to challenge Putin, and I still think we don't have the full story on what's going on, some of those folks are very bad, too, in addition to Putin. Why this impacts our security is because Russia's got the largest nuclear arsenal in the entire world. From a conventional perspective, I don't think they're even close to the threat to us as, say, China would be. But if those nuclear weapons get into the wrong hands and they're used either in that theater or beyond, that could be very catastrophic. So I think U.S. interest is to keep an eye and do whatever we can to mitigate that possibility. What that appropriate thing is now, I think it's very unclear, and I think we would need more information. But some of the people in Washington who are hoping that all that implodes with inside Russia, that could create some huge, huge risks in terms of nuclear proliferation. Okay.
You were just in New Hampshire. There is some new polling out that shows the former president at 47%. This is the St. Anselm poll. You're at 19%, which I think is a little bit lower than you were prior to this. Christie, Haley, and Scott all picked up a percentage point. Are you frustrated by the polling that you're seeing so far?
Our mission is very simple. We're going to defeat Biden. We're going to get all this stuff done for the American people. No more excuses. Republicans need to win elections again, and we need to actually bring all these important issues from the border to crime to the economy in for a landing. We did all of that in the state of Florida. There hasn't been a Republican official in the country that has beat the Democrats more on issue after issue and beat them at the ballot box with a historic landslide re-election victory.
But before you can do that, you've got to. I understand, sir, and I hate to interrupt, but you got to get through.
Martha,
go ahead.
And when we were in New Hampshire voters want to meet you. They want to see you. They're not just going to say, I'm pulling for this person without doing it. So we're building support. People are appreciative of my story and our philosophy. So we're going to get it done. But this is a long road, and Rome wasn't built in a day. So stay tuned. We're going to be up there a lot. Meet the folks. They take this process very seriously.
What do you think is the catalyst that moves these numbers, though, in a big way? Because the former president is dominant right now, and a lot of people would like to knock him off that block. He said that you weren't so nice yesterday because you scheduled something at the same time he did, and he didn't appreciate that. What do you say to him about that?
That's bizarre. I mean, it's a big state. There's a lot of voters. We had a packed house. It was a lot of fun. They asked a lot of great questions. You can tell these are very attentive voters. But I think the reality of this, Martha, and I know like those of us who are in the process, we think everyone's living and breathing this every day. A lot of these voters will start paying a lot more attention as we get into the fall and the winter. That's just the reality. Yeah. So our goal is to build the type of operation we need, make sure that we're introducing ourselves to as many people as we can, and then when it gets to crunch time, be able to turn on the juice and get the job done. And we're doing that in all the early states, and I think we have a better presence on the ground than any candidate has, and we're going to continue to build that, and we're happy with what we've seen so far.
There's a long way to go, that is for sure, and that's why we all stay tuned. On the other side of this break, I want to play something for you from Joe Biden, who is very proud of Biden economics. Bidenomics, actually, is what he calls it, and I want to give you a chance to respond to that on the other side here. Thank you, Governor. We'll be right back.
Hi, everyone. I'm Brian Kilmeade. I want you to do me a favor. I want you to click to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page. This is the only way that I know for sure that you're not going to miss any great commentary, any great news bites, any great interviews coming your way on Fox. You can get it all here on YouTube. So subscribe right now.